message to the billionaire class: you can't have it all.
Welcome to the Evolution of Now. I am your host this week, Jordan, and I am joined by my other very amazing co-host, Christopher. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. How are you guys doing this week?
Pretty good. I'm still here. It's nice actually not having Trump this week.
Oh yeah, he's over in the UK land, isn't he?
I wondered what the smell was. I've got to say, I'm having so much fun in politics right now. I've not had this much fun in politics for a while, even if it's just cackling at the mad shapes the flames are making. Trump has showed up, told NATO to get fucked, told May to get fucked, then said telling May to get fucked was fake news.
Yeah. He wants all the NATO members, even Germany, to raise the amount that they pay for defense or something, right?
Yeah, he wants to bring it to 4% when it's 2% at the moment. When that's absurd.
Meanwhile, the U.S. is not even spending 4% for that. So anyway, moving on. Since we already heard his voice, it is the immaculate Michael. How you doing, Mike?
Hi, I'm good.
Immaculate?
I don't know. It's been a long time since I hosted, and I'm trying.
Yeah, let's not get carried away here, Jordan. Come on.
I know. Damn.
So I'm just sitting here patiently waiting my turn, and yeah.
Oh yeah, you're here. Oh, forgot.
I'm sitting here in the sauna that is Iowa.
Yeah.
I just got back from Wisconsin, and I swear I fucking melted as soon as I got out of the car.
Oh my goodness! But we know that you're probably dehydrated. But other than that, how are you?
Oh, I'm all right. Been playing board games all day.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah.
By the way, your name is Aubrey, right? Because
yes, it is.
Someone else completely
Aubrey. I also answered a badger. And
Tensai badger, apparently, to some folks.
Or any combination thereof.
Yeah. Tensai Aubrey badger. Does that work?
Sure, whatever.
I
mean, I don't care, mood.
Sounds like it.
Yeah. Badger don't give a fuck. Which is ironically how I got my nickname in the first place.
It all makes sense.
Yep.
All right, so just to kick things off, let's start with you, Chris. Do you have any stories you kind of want to go over?
Well, I did want to mention how there are people in the Democratic Party right now that are crying like babies right now because superdelegates are being marginalized a little bit in the election process.
Oh.
And
not that marginalized, really.
Just a little bit, and they're crying bloody murder over it. But it's funny. The superdelegates are crying about their losing power in the Democratic Party. Jerry Connolly said this here: I believe this decision, if they go forward, is going to do terrible damage to the party harmony. Oh, it disenfranchises the elected leadership of the party. The last time we allowed that to happen was 1972, and we had the worst landslide in our history. I believe
probably
that
because
elected
they didn't
officials
bother supporting their own fucking nominee.
I believe that elected officials across the country, Congress and governors, I believe they provide a ballast for the party that we very much need, Connolly added. With all due respect, to somebody who thinks we don't need it, when we haven't had it, Democrats have had disastrous results. Well, guess what? We had...
Like FDR?
Well...
JFK?
Yeah. But thinking about that logic, though, Hillary Clinton had superdelegates. What happened there? She lost the primary, or well, she won the primary by technicalities, but she lost the general. So you had a horrible defeat, regardless. So I mean, that doesn't equate to what they're even trying to push here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so I mean the thing is, and also the number of superdelegates aren't changing, not at all. All they're doing is simply saying you have to wait until the second vote before superdelegates can be counted.
Yeah.
So all that means is if the person who has the most number of votes doesn't win in the first round, because I think you have to get, what is it, like a majority? You have to get at least 50%. It's something like that. I don't remember the exact number that you need to get in delegates.
I don't remember.
There's a certain number you have to get in delegates in order to actually win, to get the nomination. So if you don't have, which, for example, I can't remember whether or not, because with the superdelegates voting in the first round, it was such a fucking landslide that there was no real point, that we all knew Hillary was going to win.
Yeah, before even the election or the primary election happened at the DNC, yeah, like the public media, all the news networks were counting all of the superdelegate counts towards it before anything ever happened either. And so
to be honest, there is nothing about this new system that prevents them from still doing that.
Yeah, probably not. But
so because they can just simply say, well, if your choice, if it gets to the second round of voting, who will you vote for?
Yeah.
And then that's all they need to put them on the board. And they will, because they will.
Probably.
So it's not like they're actually losing any power.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess
because the only times they really even become relevant in the first place is if it's so close that it ends up on a second vote anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Or that it would trigger a second vote, I should say.
Yeah. I guess the problem with the primary, the Democratic primary last time with Hillary and with Bernie was that it was how the media was reporting the delegate the decisions of the delegates. So it made it seem as though the decision or the nomination has already kind of been decided for Hillary.
Yeah,
and,
there was. Sorry, John. Carry on.
Oh no! I was just wrapping up my statement. That's all I wanted to say.
I do.
Yeah,
I need to be careful of that. Yeah, they also did a thing where if it was a caucus state, they'd report the delegate count, the complete delegate count, including the superdelegates, and say, like, if it was 50-50, they'd say, oh, well, Hillary won 15 and Bernie won 10. It sounds like Hillary's won by quite a margin there, but it was actually 10-10, and Hillary just got 5 delegates out of thin air.
Yeah.
If it was a primary state, they'd report the vote count, because the vote counts are much larger. It looks like a bigger loss.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were states that where Bernie won actually, and then the delegate counts were saying that Hillary won basically because of that. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a Fox News
horrible
noted that I cannot remember the state, but Bernie won.
Fox News was having a field day with that. They're like, yes, we get to make the Democrats look undemocratic because their
Bernie
system
won
is
like
undemocratic.
65-35 or something, and then but there were so few delegates and few super delegates, and when they actually counted it up, it was like 11-7 for Hillary. It's like fucked up.
Yeah, I don't remember which state that was either. It was probably one of the Midwestern states because it wasn't very populous. But yeah,
Yeah, this
there
cycle
is
was
absolutely nothing from the media saying just adding those numbers in. There's nothing to stop them from continuing to do that.
Yeah.
Because, yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty messed up. And
So
that's part of the problem here with the people here, I guess the party elites, is that they're crying that these elections won't go to a second vote anyway, and so they're losing their power. And I say to that, wah, cry about it, buddy.
They are concerned that if Bernie runs again, he might get enough of a majority of delegates to just win the nomination without it triggering a second vote.
And that's what they're trying to
concern.
fight against. Yeah.
When we were complaining about superdelegates last time, I said, well, they never decided an election, and that was the thing. And what they're saying is here is they're basically undercutting that argument by saying they would decide an election against the will of the voters, which.
Yeah, I mean,
If you're not going to change the result of the election, why do you even bother? Why do you need to be represented in the process?
Well,
If you don't believe that your vote is worth so much more than other people, than the average people in your state, why do you need to have so much more weight in the process if you're just going to go along with what they vote for anyway?
Well, that's the problem. That's not what they think. They actually think that that we, the people, are too stupid to pick our own candidates, and that's why they're doing this. They're afraid that if we are left to our own devices to vote for this democratically, that we would put in the wrong people, maybe the wrong people for them, to be very specific. But
because quite honestly, if the Democratic Party had actually supported McGovern in '72, he probably could have won that election. He was a populist left-wing candidate. He won the nomination overwhelmingly in the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
And then the establishment, all the rich guys, they said, well, we're not going to give you any money. He got no backing from the DNC or the DCCC.
Yeah. I mean, that's hardly even the first time that someone in the Democratic Party got screwed by the establishment, too. There was actually a guy back when FDR was president running for governor of California. He was, I forget his first name. It's Sinclair. He wrote a few popular books. I forget what his name was. I think it was Animal Farm or something, or one of those he wrote, and he was avowedly a socialist. And so what the Democratic establishment did, and FDR himself did, was they actually supported the Republican that was against him in his election. And so he lost because of that.
FDR went basically social democrat because he was trying to cut the socialists off from winning, because he was afraid. I mean, he came from a wealthy family. He was afraid of essentially a Soviet revolution here in the U.S., and he knew we were on the brink of one because of the Great Depression, because of the wealth gap. And so he knew he needed to basically close that gap and bring us closer to equality. Not quite equality, because that's not really something. It's very rare that a wealthy man thinks that we need true equality, especially in regards to wealth.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to say it's impossible, but it's kind of close to it. But yeah, so I mean, he was against socialism. He enacted a lot of socialist policies, but he did it in a social democrat way, which is different from democratic socialism, which, by the way, is not what Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez are. They are social democrats.
By the way, I totally said the wrong book anyway. It was Animal Farm was what I was thinking of, but that's actually a George Orwell book.
Yes, it is.
And I said Animal House, which is actually a National Lampoon's movie.
Yes.
But
okay.
I have to find the guy's name, though, real quick, just to find out who this guy was.
But so basically, so I mean, basically, social democrats, they're kind of more along the lines of FDR, which is where you're trying to basically stay within the capitalist system and bring about more of a social equality within the capitalism. Democratic socialists are kind of more like
post-capitalist.
It's actually it's post-capitalism. It's in a socialist economy. So this is the primary difference between them. But yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Cool. Chris, any word on that book? No, he's still looking. All right.
Yeah, not yet.
All right, well, you just let us know when you get it. So we're going to move on. And Tinsai, did you have any stories you wanted to bring up today?
I just wanted to talk. I didn't have an article with me, but so apparently Joe Crowley has decided he's going to run third party against Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez because apparently all those things that he was saying about unity and supporting the Democratic nominee is complete and utter bullshit.
Wow. So this is new to me. I did not hear anything about this. So
yeah, I just heard about it just a little bit ago. So yeah, I know Kyle Kulinski reported on it in Secular Talk, and I think I saw something about it on what is it, TYT Nation?
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember the host's name. He lives in Michigan.
Wow. But you know what? On the
Sorry.
flips,
I don't
that's
watch
okay.
it very often.
Not to worry. On the flip side, I did hear that Bernie Sanders is going to join Alexandria in a stump. So he's going to campaign with her. Yeah,
Good.
that's a powerful endorsement right there.
Yeah.
Hopefully, it's enough because that's really crummy.
I'm not sure it's as popular or as powerful as it used to be, considering he's backing a pro-life candidate in Kansas, I think, or something like that, or in Nebraska.
Yeah, I only found out about that today, but Bernie apparently endorsed a pro-lifer because their economics is on board, and yeah, I think that's a bad idea.
Yeah, that's tough. Yeah.
Well, I think that reveals more of what his priorities are. His priorities are economics, not pro-choice versus pro-life.
That's true.
I mean, yeah, but you gotta have some lines in the sand on the social issues.
Means he's right, but that does reveal where his priorities are. So I don't know. He's made a lot of decisions recently that kind of make me go, really?
Yeah.
That's what you decided to do? You don't have to endorse people, you know.
True. I mean, it's tough. I mean, that's the reason I think that's why, and I'm happy that Bernie Sanders, he didn't brand himself as a cult of personality. He went out of his way to let people know that you shouldn't believe in a man, you should believe in the vision. And so it's important to to admit that Bernie Sanders is a laudable figure. However, he does fall short just like everyone else. And so we shouldn't be too focused on Bernie Sanders, the political figure and the visionary. It should be about the message. And, it's okay that we differ.
Yeah. And even then, I mean, even if Bernie does go run in 2020 and actually by some miracle actually manages to win the nomination and then go on and win the general, to me the main hurdle is getting the nomination. But and that's why I say by some miracle. The main thing for me is we need more than just the presidency to actually get the change that we want in this country. We need the legislature. And so that means turning up for primaries, turning up to vote, and turning up in the midterms. And I'm not sure a Bernie presidency with this current spate, I mean, even if we manage to make some major gains in the legislature this year, I'm not sure it's enough to really deliver it to Bernie so he can actually do something if he were to become president in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
I don't know. To me, the primary goal is to get the legislature where it needs to be, and then we can worry about the presidency.
Yeah, agreed.
But that doesn't mean that, if he runs for president and he gets the nomination, that I'm not going to vote for him in the general. Of course, I'm going to vote for him in the general. But yeah. So
yeah, essentially adoptive.
My point is, we don't. Running for president is primarily that'll get you the most news coverage. So if you can then use that to promote people down ballot wherever you go, do it. And I mean, Bernie actually did a somewhat pretty good job at that in 2016. A lot better than Hillary did by any measure. I mean, she practically stole all their money from the state parties. But I mean, that's primarily the primary thing, though, is we need to really focus on the local races. And with the local races, the best way to fight back against the money that, like the Koch brothers are just going to be pouring in and all that, and other billionaires and the super PACs, is to volunteer and get out and walk and talk to people in person.
Right.
Make the phone calls, make the personal connections. That will get us much further, especially on the local level, than it will on anything else.
Yeah.
What something Cortez noted is that in a small race like that primary, a couple of thousand people decide the election. So
yeah,
just going and talking to a few hundred people can completely swing the election.
Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, pretty much. A president. I mean, of course, aside from the power to signing things into law. They're essentially a branding mechanism. Pretty much, they decide how the party is going to be consumed, how the party is going to be viewed. So, I mean, if Bernie Sanders was in office, he would have rebranded the Democratic Party in a sense, how everyone views it. But yeah, definitely start.
But I mean, Obama rebranded the Democratic Party, but at the same time, the Democratic Party entered into the 2016 primary season, which was started back in 2015, and they were so broke they had to sign a contract with Hillary Clinton's campaign just to keep the lights on. So, just having someone who we think is an okay president, or even a great president, no matter what your opinion of Obama is, isn't enough, you know? Because, Obama faced 6 years of obstructionism.
Yes.
He didn't get a whole lot done.
Nope.
And, whether you want to blame him for that or not, I don't care. Or if you want to blame the Republicans for it, I don't care. The point is, we didn't have the legislature in there long enough for him to actually be able to do anything that he wanted to do. Although I would debate some of that. But, he had, for 2 years, he kind of set out his priorities. But the main thing is, where did the money go? I'm sorry, I'm branching into somewhere else. But the DNC somehow ended up broke. Where did the money go?
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But
in other news, though, I just found out who that Arthur was. Upton Sinclair. He wrote The Jungle. That was the book that I was trying to remember. For some reason, I always mix up The Jungle and Animal Farm, for some reason, the titles of them. I don't know why. But, yeah. Upton Sinclair was a avowed socialist, and he wrote a lot of novels and stuff, and he ran for California governor, and the Democratic Party disavowed him because he was a socialist. So,
well, if we've got... I could try to be quick, but I want to talk briefly about... Well, over this past 2 weeks, our government exploded, and then Trump's visit happened. Kind of want to mention both. So, about a week ago now, Theresa May announced her Brexit plan. That was great. They finally have a Brexit plan. It's self-contradictory and it doesn't work. Things like, we're going to have the freedom to make our own laws, but we're going to keep our laws in line with the EU. What you're saying is, we're going to follow the EU laws. Yeah, but we're going to have the freedom to change it. But we're going to follow their laws. Yeah. So what she basically said was, we're going to leave the EU, but follow all their laws, stay in most of the common agreements, not have a vote, and pay more money.
Sounds like a great plan.
Yeah. So naturally, everyone was pissed off about this. I mean, literally everyone was pissed off about this. With Brexit saying, well, if that's the plan, why are we even leaving? And I'm like, yeah, why? So the day after the plan was announced, the guy in charge of Brexit, David Davis, quit.
Nice.
By the way, I got the news alert for that at 6 o'clock my time, which is midnight.
Yeah.
In the UK. So apparently he quit about midnight.
Apparently what happened was he didn't want to make his own way home, so he waited until the ministerial transport dropped him off at home. Then he quit.
Yeah, didn't your boy Jeremy Corbyn actually have a nice little quip about that?
Yeah,
that was pretty good.
But then a few other ministers quit. The Boris Johnson, the Home Secretary, quit. Several MPs resigned as well. The thing is, Boris is sort of known as the face of Brexit. He was one of the big Leave campaigners. So I find it really interesting how all the Brexiters are jumping ship now at the first opportunity, because they know it's a farce.
Another interesting thing, he looks like the UK version of Donald Trump.
Yeah,
so.
But he's more Paul Ryan, I think. Really cool participant.
He's got stupid looking hair, and he just looks like a moron.
He's all right.
His hair doesn't look as much like a wig as Trump's does.
Yeah, no. It looks more real,
stupid hair,
but stupid.
And he's fond of really stupid publicity stunts, like the time he hung from a zipline and got stuck. He decided to try and zip line into like a stage for a rally or something.
Yeah, with like British flags, right? Didn't he have like little flags too?
Yeah, he got stuck, and then someone had to go and rescue him.
It's good stuff.
Such an idiot.
Yeah, but so in that respect, he's a bit like Trump, but his politics are more like Paul Ryan, where he's really corporatist. He was London mayor for a while and fucked the place up.
Yikes.
Job
That's
which down
why
to
they have
Sadiq
Sadiq
Khan.
Khan now.
Yep. Who is actually quite good. He's not as left as I am, but he's quite good. But that's not the topic. In the wake of this, of course, then Trump shows up, and obviously Trump entering a situation is always going to make everything better.
Big league.
So.
Oh, don't forget the balloon.
Oh yeah. We'll get to that.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
Trump shows up. He does his NATO summit, which obviously goes great. And then he comes to the UK. This morning, he did an interview with the Sun newspaper where he said, yeah, well, Theresa May's handling of Brexit is completely awful, and Boris Johnson would make a really good prime minister. Of course, later he does a news conference with Theresa May where he says that interview was fake news. So, yeah, within the space of a few hours, he's told the Prime Minister to get fucked, and told her that someone else would make a better Prime Minister, and then said that interview was fake news. So the Trump visit went well.
Yeah, that's great.
He drew the London protests, so London obviously been protesting his visit. Early estimates reckon about 250,000 people flooded into central London for the protest. There's a few big squares in London, Parliament Square and Trafalgar Square were both full, and Regent Street was apparently full right the back. It's huge. As part of the protest, one group flew a balloon, a giant 20-foot balloon of a Trump in a diaper with a mobile phone. It's amazing.
Poor little baby Trump.
And small hands. The Conzi organisers, it's small hands and it's fragile with small hands, which is just a perfect metaphor for Trump.
Yeah.
Fragile with small hands and full of hot air. That was it.
Yeah.
That's great.
Trump apparently found out about this and said, I feel unwelcome at all these protests in London. Which goes to prove Trump is not, in fact, completely oblivious. Yes, Trump, that is the point.
I think, if I remember correctly, Trump was actually starting to try and blame a little bit of the hostility there on the governor there, who is, I guess,
mayor?
a Muslim, or the mayor guy, right?
Yeah, you're talking about Sadiq Khan, the mayor of London.
Yeah, exactly.
Sadiq did a video, actually, where... So, Trump did a press conference thing where he's saying about how London, it's like a war zone. He's talking about this hospital in central London with stabbing victims, and there's blood all over the floors from all the stabbing.
Knives. He said that a few times.
Knives. But Sadiq Khan's like, why are you singling out London and him specifically for criticism when there's been an increase in crime across the country and increases in terrorism across everywhere? And all I can say is Sadiq. That's why. Sadiq.
Yeah.
Yep. Sadiq Khan.
It's not hard to understand.
He's a competent, well-respected Muslim mayor.
Yeah.
Everything Trump isn't.
Trump's motives are very easily foreseen.
Definitely.
But,
he wears it right on his sleeve.
Mm-hmm.
He's too stupid to actually play the whistle or the dog whistling game like other right-wing politicians typically do.
Yeah.
There were a few pro-Trump supporters there. There was like 100 or so in a little corner. It was hilarious. With like "Make America Great Again" stuff. That Trump balloon is actually something I want to mention in a little bit more detail because it's amazing. A lot of people saying, "What's the point of it? It's completely pointless." And or some people just saying it was a bit of fun, but actually it highlights something really, really cool. One, Trump is a child. When he found out about the balloon, he went a bit nuts. So, they're making me feel unwelcome. Where? Two.
They've been planning this for weeks.
Yeah, I know. They've been planning. They did a
secret.
Yeah. Apparently, only found out about it a couple of few days ago. Apparently, and he's like, "Oh, I feel unwelcome."
God.
Yes, Trump. That's the point. When the right found out about this, they organised a a counter protest where they were going to fly a Sadiq Khan balloon. Why Sadiq Khan? Because Sadiq.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, though. They wanted Sadiq Khan to not allow the balloon.
Well, yeah,
These people
because
have spent months now complaining about some guy who got arrested for, screwing with a trial, claiming it's a free speech issue. Say, free speech has to be protected. But, of course, you fly a balloon. Nah, you can't have that. So it exposes the blatant hypocrisy of the far-right free speech brigade.
yeah,
Completely.
well, and of course they actually want Sadiq Khan because he's the mayor of London, and they want to fly it over London, so he has to actually sign off on it.
Yeah.
So they want him to decline the balloon of himself, so they can go, yeah, see, they're against free speech. Except he said, yeah, no, it doesn't violate
so
the law.
well, what if we have a Sadiq Khan balloon? You're like, well, yeah, if you really want to.
Okay. Which has been basically like every time they're like, oh, they're attacking our people, they're making fun of our people, so we're going to turn around and make fun of your people and attack your people. And we're just kind of like, okay, and? Like with Bill Maher and Samantha Bee and all that. It was just like, okay, and?
Yeah, I mean, it's the playbook of them,
Yeah, I know. But it's funny because they expect us to get all worked up about it because they get all worked up when their people are attacked. But in reality, we're just like, yeah, okay.
They are silly.
Called thick skins. Grow some.
Yeah.
Silly little snowflakes.
It's amazing.
Oh.
The protest in London, and then he met the Queen, of course, and that didn't go out too well. That didn't go out too badly, I should say, because
were her bone spurs acting up?
Yeah, there was a satire article saying that Theresa May Queen can't meet Trump because she's got bone spurs. But
the funny part was, I actually thought that was a real news article.
Oh, me too.
Literally purposely making fun of him.
Oh, that was so funny.
I actually told my sister about that when I saw it in here on Discord earlier today because I thought it was real. Yeah, it was actually from the New Yorker, the thing that Michael posted. But yeah, it's a satire thing from the New Yorker.
Borowitz report. Yeah.
I didn't realize it at
first.
first.
It's unfortunate. I wish that had actually been true news.
I would have so much respect for the Queen of England right there. Oh my god,
dude, they're so good with that. Do you remember when they posted a satire about Trump in the Girl Scouts, and how he said there were many sick or bad guys in that organization? You don't remember that?
No.
Oh damn, we actually talked about it on the show.
I probably wasn't listening.
Terrible
I didn't
memories.
really listen to the show before I started being on it.
True. And Chris, you have bad memory.
I think it's a part of our times here where there's so many news stories every single week. It's hard to remember everything that's happened,
True.
So it's
true.
It's easy to get inundated, especially since we do a weekly podcast here. It's just I can't remember everything that we've talked about in the past.
Yeah, do you remember what slow news days were like? And CNN would just run like some goose getting rescued in a pond out in like Australia or something because there was nothing on the news. Do you remember that? And that happened rather than like Trump tweeted something. It's just constant. There's so much news.
Didn't CNN spend like 6 months talking about a plane flying into black holes or something?
Yeah. 6 months and probably millions in special effects budgets trying to.
Oh, dude, the special effects were insane at that point. It was crazy.
Yeah. But I was actually watching the live interview on BBC with Trump, and I get it now. Like, I'm watching, I'm thinking, he'd lie about something. I go, oh, that's a lie. But before I've even processed the fact that it's a lie, there's another one. Bam! Oh, well, that's wrong. Oh, no, that's wrong. I lose track of everything. I can't process one lie before there's another one in your face. And your mind's jumping from one to the other. I can't remember anything that was said because it was all wrong.
It's a debate tactic called the Gish Gallop.
Yeah.
Where they throw out so much stuff that you can't possibly respond to it all.
It's not even respond. You can't process it.
Too.
I can't tell you what was wrong with it because I haven't had time to process what was wrong with it. I just know it was wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Like, fucking hell.
Yeah.
Although, mind you, debaters, like professional debaters or whatever, they usually, they have a basic understanding of the English language.
And hide it a bit better. But yeah, that's the protests and Trump in London, and the visit of Trump in London, and the explosion of our government.
Woohoo!
Yeah, in a nutshell. Nice. All right.
Brexit blew up in everyone's faces as we expected it to.
Yeah.
Weird. Wouldn't have seen that
Actually, speaking about that, somehow Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, was asked would they asked about having a Brexit or a Brexit-like.
What, a Frexit?
Frexit, yeah, I was about to say.
yeah, this just about out there. And he said, well, the reason why they didn't do it out there is because like they actually knew that it was a very strong chance that they would vote to leave. So like just having the option, he was like, yeah, we're more sensible. We know we don't want to give that option. That's a little bit too far. So yeah, he's sensible.
Yeah. Well, and mind you, Macron himself is very pro-EU, very pro-corporate, very pro-business. So, I mean, of course he's not going to want to leave the EU.
I mean, just think about it. Like, you asked people whether they want independence from an outside body or not. it's a pretty easy thing to say yes to.
This is Europe, where they've spent over 1,000 years literally hating their neighbors.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, the Scottish hate us to this day. So to be fair, so did the Welsh and the Irish and the French and German and Spanish.
Everyone.
Like I said, literally hating their neighbors.
I don't know if it's hating their neighbours as much as just hating the English. even like English hate the other English, like dirty Southerners down south, and the Southerners don't like the Northerners.
I was reading up on this community in the Rhine River Valley, and literally they had no loyalties to France or Germany because they had basically changed hands every 10 years. And so they're kind of like, okay, who do we belong to this decade? Who are we supposed to be loyal to this decade? I don't care anymore.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. All right, well, so much going on. Well, I mean, honestly, UK, you guys can keep them. We don't want them.
One final point. I realised what I think would be the best thing to happen, and it would be for Trump to get sick and need an NHS hospital.
We all know the White House doctor is shit.
Yeah, well, nothing major. I mean, yeah, but nothing major. But I want him to get sick and need treatment in an NHS hospital in the middle of London. I think that would be priceless.
That would be, wouldn't it?
He would probably try and complain about it somehow. Or I mean, obviously he would, but they would lie their asses off probably.
Well, he would probably demand to be taken to a private facility because he's trying.
Like, I'm sure he would, but I mean, like
the commoners.
Like I don't know. There's a car crash happens and they take him to the nearest hospital, and he's not really seriously hurt. But they need to check him out at the hospital, and.
Yeah, I mean, mind you, that's what the White House physician is for. But he'd probably need like machinery and stuff to do a proper examination. But yeah. I doubt they'd let NHS doctors actually handle his case. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's an interesting topic.
That'd be interesting.
Yeah, we'll definitely get into that at a later date. So, yeah, definitely. Yeah, moving on. I'm really rusty because we took last week off. So.
Oh my God, a full week off.
Oh, shit. Chris, you suck.
I had an amazing week off. I had an amazing week off up in Wisconsin. It was glorious. It was in the 70s the whole time. That's the 20s for right around 20 degrees for our friends who are not in the U.S. And it was just not so humid. You could literally swim through the air. It was amazing. Just amazing.
Damn.
Well, that's good.
The only downside was that I was trapped up there with a couple of Trumpians.
Well, it's Wisconsin, right? So.
Well, it's my roommate's brother and his girlfriend, and they live in Arkansas. So.
Yeah. But still, Wisconsin is Scott Walker land, though, too. But.
Yeah.
Meh.
Yeah.
Land of cows and Scott Walker, basically.
It was a mixed overall. Oh, I got to throw up in a parking lot again. Every time I go to Wisconsin, I throw up in a parking lot.
It's a red.
I wasn't even drunk. I hadn't had any alcohol.
Wisconsin will do that to people.
Yeah.
Yeah, Wisconsin.
It's all the dairy.
Yeah. Moving on. Like, actually moving on this time.
Oh man, yeah, we can only go up from there. So, so tonight's topic is about abortion. You know, I really wanted to talk about this. Oh, sorry.
It's a nice, light, easy topic, right?
Yeah,
Non-controversial.
We always have such easy topics on this show.
Most people don't really have much of an opinion.
It's so sad and lazy. Ugh, we don't even try
Yeah.
on this podcast anymore.
It's a shame.
Sad.
I'll shut up now.
Very sad.
So you know, I thought this would be a good thing to get into, especially because it is going to become central to politics. Pretty, like, I mean, if it's not now, it's going to be you know, in the coming weeks, because Trump gets another Supreme Court pick, as we discussed last week on how Justice Kennedy is retiring and, you know, leaving his spot vacant for Trump to fill in. And so he decided to go with, you know, unsurprisingly, a conservative nominee by the name of oh God,
I know his last name's like Kavanaugh.
Brett Kavanaugh. Yeah, I was.
Kavanaugh.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, exactly. I was trying to like fix my. I was trying to get the last name right, Kavanaugh. Well, yeah. So pretty much he's a conservative, and, you know, pretty much his ideology is exactly what you would imagine, and one of the most prescient issues that, you know, that he's going to be presiding over will be on abortion, and how Roe versus Wade ties into that, which of course we know to be the law that made abortion legal in this country. It was signed in 1973. And so yeah, I just really wanted to talk about just, you know, we're going to get into the stats and the data because that's what we do, but also we're a political podcast, so we talk about the politics as well. And, well, shit, I don't even know how to start this. I'm so rusty.
Can I start with something?
Yeah, of course.
So, as what's his name, Gorsuch said when he was asked about would he overturn Roe v. Wade by Lindsey Graham, that's it. I was trying to remember, and all I could think was Southern Belle Senator. Thank you, Jon Stewart, for putting that image in my head. But he was asked about overturning it, and Gorsuch replied by the fact that Roe v. Wade is basically settled law by now. There's been a lot of challenges to it over the years, and it is held up, and it's been reaffirmed many times by precedent to the point where essentially there will be no overturning of Roe v. Wade from the Supreme Court. Mind you, that's what Gorsuch said in his confirmation hearings, when, by the way, he was very much a conservative pick, being who knew damn well that he could easily say that he would overturn Roe v. Wade if he were nominated, and he would still have more than enough votes to actually be confirmed. So I'm just going to put that out there. So right there, we theoretically have one vote, enough of a vote to basically make it so that Roe v. Wade won't be overturned if it should come before the Supreme Court again.
Mm-hmm.
And that's theoretical, mind you, because you never actually know how judges will rule until they're on the bench. Another point is, you know, specifically about that settled law. That would mean, if that is the case, you know, and it eventually, you know, it just basically gets rejected by saying the Supreme Court's already ruled on this, it is law. You know, that you can't ban all abortions. Restrictions, yes, I do expect to see a lot more restrictions on abortions coming up. But actually, abortions banned altogether, I don't expect that to happen. I think that by now, with the legal precedents being the way they are, basically they would have to pass a constitutional amendment, which I'm assuming everybody listening already knows how difficult that is, but I suppose I should go over it. So in order to pass a constitutional amendment, you have to get a 2/3 majority vote in the House and the Senate. And then the president has to sign it. And then it goes to the states, where 3/4 of the states have to ratify it. That is a huge, monumental process. So I honestly don't see that happening. Not even with basically the stranglehold that Republicans have, not just in the House, but kind of in the Senate. They definitely don't have enough for a 2/3 majority in the Senate. But also even in the state legislatures. I don't think they have enough to even ratify it, even if they can get over the Senate hurdle. So that's basically my point, is people panicking over Roe v. Wade can calm down at least a little bit. I do expect to see some restrictions. I don't expect to see the entire thing completely overturned.
Yeah. I think the idea is that they would essentially gut it in different ways, and I'm going to get into that. Yeah, I'm going to get into that in just a little bit, but I do want to kind of go over who Brett Kavanaugh, who he is and where he came from. Of course, not where he's born, but like the job he had before he possibly taken this one up. And he's a judge on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit. And that matters because he presided with two other judges, which made a panel on a case in 2017 that saw the Trump administration block an undocumented minor for the case of who was referred as Jane Doe in that case from obtaining an abortion. And so around that time, the ACLU they sued on behalf of Jane Doe, and they were arguing that the Trump administration was violating her constitutional right to an abortion, and citing a Supreme Court precedent which established that the government may not place an undue burden on a woman's access to abortion. And of course, the Trump administration turns around with their counter argument saying was that they were not burdening Jane Doe because she could return to her home country, which, mind you, abortion is outlawed in, or she could find a sponsor, and she would have to. She was a 17-year-old. She could find a sponsor that would provide her housing and would eventually permit her abortion access. So, which is crazy because that process can take up to weeks and months. And in Texas, which is where all this was taking place, in the laws that she would have to abide by, they ban abortion at 20 weeks. So that would have put her. Yeah,
it's time sensitive, and they know that. That's the whole point.
Yeah, that's why they always play the time game like that. You know, they always try and draw it out as long as they can. That's why, like in some instances, they force some women that want to get an abortion to take like a 48-hour or even a week-long period after consultation with a doctor. Then they can finally go back to the doctor and then get an abortion. And they do those types of things in some states in order to, force that on them and say like, oh, well, it took too long. Sorry, you can't get it now. If you go too early, you can't get it. If you go too late, you can't get it, and they play that game.
Texas in particular has only a few abortion clinics left. And so particularly if you live in the western part of Texas, you have to drive, I think, several hours just to get to your nearest abortion clinic. And then you have to go basically wait, I think it's 48 to 72 hours. I don't remember the exact amount, but it's one of those two before you can actually get an abortion.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of them, if they can't afford the hotel to stay overnight near the abortion clinic, they just basically have to give up on getting an abortion.
Yeah. Wealthier and well-off people have no less problem with that, obviously. And then that basically falls on the poor and the lower classes that get screwed over by that.
With employment as well.
If she has a job, she has to take off work to go do that.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, so your employer can fuck you as well, though.
Depending on what kind of abortion you're getting, like the longer you wait, the more invasive a process it is too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, I mean, if you go like in the earliest stages, it's literally you just take a pill and then you basically piss the baby out, essentially. It's just a bundle of cells at that point.
Yeah.
We're
Disturbing way to say that.
I know, it was a weird way to say it, but it was the only way I could think of to state it so that guys would understand what it's like.
We're going to get into the process.
Guys don't really understand menstruation.
No, you don't. and we're definitely going to get into the actual the options that are available in terms of abortion. Kind of just so because I feel like a lot of people are miseducated about what it actually entails. But before we get into that, I just want to kind of go over, just kind of wrap Brett Kavanaugh a little bit. Wrap him up a little bit because this was the case that actually brought him to Trump's attention, and because he actually accepted both of Trump's arguments, those arguments that I brought up that the Trump administration was making on why they weren't creating undue burden on her access to abortion, and so he released this statement following his no vote, which he voted against her having that right, and this is what he said. Quote, "The minor is alone and without family or friends. She is in a U.S. government detention facility in a country that for her is foreign. She is 17 years old. She is pregnant and has to make a major life decision. Is it really absurd for the United States to think that the minor should be transferred to her immigration sponsor, ordinarily a family member, relative, or friend, before she makes that decision? And keep in mind that the government is not forcing the minor to talk to the sponsor about the decision or to obtain consent. It is merely seeking to place the minor in a better place when deciding whether to have an abortion." End quote. So
I'm
he's
sure that's
essentially
really what it is.
Whoa,
right.
That's actually not true. Because if you're a minor, you have to have your guardian's permission in order to get an abortion. Yeah?
Yeah. But I think it's very semantic, especially when it comes to, I think a lot of the semantics came around her being an undocumented immigrant.
Yeah.
So whether or not she were granted the rights that an ordinary citizen would have, that was a big basis for this case. But yeah, essentially he's trying to frame this as the Trump administration just looking out for her best interests as a 17-year-old. She could get the abortion, but first consult an adult before you make this major life decision. That is actually your own decision because you control your own body.
And of course, that adult cannot be a doctor. No, it has to be someone who has no medical license, no idea what it might do to you, not even a counselor or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So they're bringing up her mental fitness in terms of how to
mind you, also, she was raped. She got raped by one of the detention guards. That's why she's pregnant.
Is that how it happened?
Yeah.
Holy fuck. Good God.
Yeah,
I didn't know that wrinkle of it. Jesus, man.
Yeah, the article, actually, I was seeking multiple articles and I was wondering, hey, why aren't they...
Nobody's talking about that part.
Yeah, nobody's writing about that detail.
We need to find that article so I can post that with this episode.
Yeah, that's a huge factor. Thank you for bringing that up. And so how this ties into how Brett will essentially gut Roe versus Wade is, there was a Slate article titled "How Brett Kavanaugh." It's quite self-explanatory. How Brett Kavanaugh will gut Roe versus Wade. Yeah, it's a pretty good title. And they say, that article explains how the new 5-4 court will justify allowing states to outlaw abortion. And they say, quote, "A conservative state will pass a draconian anti-abortion restriction, one that shutters all abortion clinics, perhaps, or outlaw abortion after a fetal heartbeat is detected. With Kavanaugh providing the decisive fifth vote, the court will rule that the state law does not pose an undue burden to abortion access. After all, the government has an interest in favoring fetal life, and women who truly want an abortion can go to another state. The majority may not admit what it's doing, but in practice, it will be overturning Roe." So
because then other states are just going to do the same thing.
Mind you, a lot of cases haven't even gotten to the Supreme Court level. Most have gotten to the state Supreme Court's levels where they're like, yeah, no, you're placing an undue burden. Or, like Mississippi has tried multiple times to shut down their one remaining abortion clinic. And their Mississippi state judges keep saying, no, you're basically, Roe v. Wade. This has been settled. This is ruled on,
Not
that's
only
at the state level.
The Roe v. Wade is settled, but then there's precedent set from Roe v. Wade that's also been settled.
Yeah. And they're like, this is settled law. You cannot. That's unconstitutional. You can't basically close your last abortion center in the state. So there are restrictions, and then there are restrictions, if you know what I mean. So there is a certain threshold they can't go beyond, and this has been repeatedly challenged and challenged and challenged, and they know damn well that they can't close the last one in the state. They just can't, because the laws have basically they've written so many laws and trap laws and everything else and restrictions trying to get the last abortion clinics in their states closed, and their own state supreme courts, who are usually appointed by their governors, and this includes like Mississippi, where when was the last Democrat governor? When was the last anti-choice or pro-choice governor in Mississippi? There's never been a pro-choice governor in Mississippi. So those are the people appointing the justices sitting on their Supreme Courts. Or however they choose their process. I guess in Iowa, our governor appoints them. Yeah. I think in other states, sometimes it's a direct election. But so, I mean, you get my point. This has been ruled on over and over again. So I think there are limits, and I'm not sure it will actually get to the Supreme Court. But I'd also like to bring up the fact that we keep saying Trump. It's not Trump. It's Pence. Pence chooses who goes on that list. Pence is the one with a religious agenda. He is super pro-life. He wants, he is anti-LGBT. He's the one going through weeding out, all this stuff. The anti-immigrant stuff is just the Trump sprinkling on top. Pence is the one choosing the policies behind Trump. So before we think that impeaching Trump solves all the problems, just remember, the one who's actually choosing all these policies and choosing who Trump puts on the court, he's next in line to be president.
And who's also a little bit more competent than our current president.
Mm-hmm. But, he's not going to sit up and shoot himself in the foot by writing a tweet at 4 a.m.
Yeah, he's by admitting that his, for example, Muslim ban is a Muslim ban.
Fake news.
Right.
He's a bit about dog whistles.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but he's old school.
It's a little bit more broad than just Pence, though, too. It's actually the religious right that we're going to be talking about soon, too, I think, more broadly than that, because he is part of that.
I think part of it is we need to remember that Pence is part of the religious right.
He is. He definitely is.
Religious right, isn't he? He's like a dominionist.
He is. He's a dominionist. He wants a Christian theocracy in the United States.
Him and Michelle Bachmann were both dominionists.
They're both dominionists. So, that's an important thing to remember. And I think because we keep saying it's Trump's policy, Trump's pick, Trump's all this, we need to remember it's not Trump, it's Pence.
Yeah. This is a good opportunity to get into the religious right and that coalition and, the evangelical, the fundamentalists. Pretty much I'll post there's a really good article on Politico called The Real Origins of the Religious Right. And essentially it kind of goes into how, their origin, where they began. And of course, today, their primary, political, rallying cry is around abortion and how they're pro-life. And so this article is paramount because it goes back into the the 1950s, and how it actually it began around segregated schooling. That was the basis to their coalition, and essentially, abortion became the next marketing, a good marketing tool in order to gather more people over to their side. Did anyone else kind of want to go into about this article? Because there's some really. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry.
This article was fascinating. Absolutely fascinating.
It blew my mind when I found it, and there's actually some good passages that I kind of want to go into here, specifically about how the religious right was pretty much indifferent to abortion, almost to the point of total endorsement of abortion. So here's a passage. It says, quote, both before and for several years after Roe, evangelicals were overwhelmingly indifferent to the subject, which they considered a Catholic issue. In 1968, for instance, a symposium sponsored by the Christian Medical Society and Christianity Today, the flagship magazine of evangelicalism, refused to characterize abortion as sinful, citing, quote, individual health, family welfare, and social responsibility as justifications for ending a pregnancy, which sounds very familiar, right? Because that's essentially how we feel today.
Weird. Yeah, the article is super fascinating, and yeah, the rights opposing of abortion rights actually wasn't because of their stance on abortion, like you're saying here. The reason why they used abortion was for their own political agenda, honestly. They started using it because it was easy to get people on their side on, and the real reason what this article goes into for the religious right rise is not actually from abortion, but segregation. And it was in the post civil rights era that this started happening, that this religious right movement started happening. And I believe one of the catalysts that they were talking about in this was they were trying to desegregate schools, and the religious right was not happy with that. And there was in particular one university called Bob Jones University, which is a southern university. It has been predominantly a white university. It's a religious Christian university.
They're Baptist.
Funny story. My ex actually went there when she was younger, when she was a little bit more religious, and it was actually because of her time at Bob Jones University when she actually started moving away from religion in her own life, I think, which is quite interesting.
That story sounds familiar.
Yeah, it's super, super interesting. But Bob Jones University back in the 70s was defiant to the calls by the federal government to desegregate, because at the time, I believe the case, there was a Supreme Court case that was happening at the time. There was...
Yeah, it was Brown versus the Board of Education, and it was decided in 1954.
Yeah, that was one of the very first civil rights decisions.
Yeah, and that was around desegregating public schools. It was
the federal government sent federal funds to some universities, some schools, and everything, and the idea was that if your school was segregating, they should not be getting federal funds, and that was the whole crux of that case. And the case,
which
thankfully, was settled.
So any school which receives any kind of federal funds, which can include grants like the Pell Grant or even scholarships. There are some specific scholarships that you can receive from the federal government. And of course, there's also student loans. Now, the federal student loans is federal money. So if you accept federal student loans, you have to meet those federal standards. And that's something that a lot of people don't realize, even when they're paying to go to a private university. If that school accepts any federal money at all, it has to follow federal standards.
Yeah, and one of those standards was segregation, and desegregating these schools. And so...
Yes. I'd also like to point out the vast majority of the efforts to desegregate schools was centered on the South.
Yeah.
generally northern schools are pretty much ignored. That's why New York City remains one of the most segregated.
I think that's something Malcolm X noted that a lot of the liberals in the North like to say, "Oh yeah, we're not the racist ones. It's the South that are the racist ones. They had the slavery."
Mm-hmm.
But when you actually look at the statistics, a lot of the North are more segregated there and have more problems with racial inequalities than the South.
Yeah.
Yes.
The usual reason for that was that I believe the terminology is like they ghettoized it, and what that means is
and you had redlining going on all the way through the 80s.
Yeah.
And because there wasn't such an effort to make sure that the schools weren't segregated, well, if you're redlining minority groups into certain school districts, that means they're going to be going to those districts and not into the wealthier districts.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, you have that.
It wasn't legally segregated. There wasn't like a white water fountain and a black water fountain. But what happened was this part of town was predominantly African American. This part of town was predominantly white. And it just so happened that more funds and more, infrastructure spending and all these other things were happening in the white areas more often than the black areas.
Often not even just so happens. They would often just say, right, this area, the black area, we're not going to give any home loans to these people because they're unreliable.
Mm-hmm.
Air quotes. They're unreliable, and you can't trust them with loans. And this area, white area, we're going to give them cheaper loans because they're reliable. They're white. They're more likely to pay their debts. And so, of course, the white people were able to get the home loans and be able to afford to buy houses and upgrade houses.
And also, there was basically an agreement that basically any houses located in the black area, they were worth less just by virtue of where they were located.
Yeah. And
so even if you were able to buy it, it wasn't worth as much.
The important missing ingredient there is that the schools are funded by property taxes. So if you live in a place,
houses are worth less, you pay less.
So will be your education.
So you get less money paid to the schools.
A very slight tangent as well. In areas like suburbs, high value housing that's quite sparse. So the infrastructure costs quite a lot because roads. You need more road per house essentially. Things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They get subsidized on their infrastructure from the cities because there's less road per for a block of flats. So they've got more money for infrastructure. They subsidize the suburbs who can't pay for their own infrastructure. But in the suburbs where it's high value housing, so there's more money per person for services, they do not subsidize the cities where there's less. So a lot of Republicans say how they're subsidizing the takers in the cities. It's actually completely the other way around. A lot of the suburbs are subsidized by the inner cities, the black people in the inner cities. So not only are they poorer, they're also paying their taxes are also going to the rich people in the suburbs.
Yeah,
that should piss you off.
They're not even getting the fruits of their labor, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
But yeah, just kind of going back to Bob Jones University for a second. It's actually located in Greenville, South Carolina, and they're very paramount to the story because of how so the IRS started sending these questionnaires to quote unquote segregation academies that were church related, and pretty much asking them whether or not they were segregating based off of race. And Bob Jones University pretty much said yes. They defiantly said we do not admit African Americans, and so essentially Bob Jones Jr., who was the founder of the school, pretty much argued that racial segregation was mandated by the Bible, which is very interesting, and I do want to put a pin on that because I think it actually it explains a lot of things. But
well, I mean, the people that wanted slavery used religion to justify the reasons for their slavery and all that. So I mean, it's still it's the same thing. They just go down the line. They're always trying to find reasons to justify their actions with their religious texts.
Yeah, I mean, well, and it's also, this is a debate that's been going on in religion for a very, very long time. I mean, that was actually the original split between the Northern and Southern Baptists, was the Southern Baptists, they read their Bible and interpreted it as pro-slavery, and the Northern Baptists read their Bibles and interpreted it as anti-slavery. Honestly, I'm not sure there's much argument between either of them because that's Leviticus and has nothing to do with Christians. But anyway, but so the thing is, it's a split that's been and I know the most about Baptists because I grew up as a Baptist. And but even then, Bob Jones kind of leans more Southern Baptist. And although they accept people from literally all over the country. But when my parents sent me to Grandview Park Baptist School here in Iowa, which is part of the GARBC, which was the successor to the Northern Baptist Convention. I think in 1920s, they decided to change their name for some reason. Basically all of our school textbooks were printed by Bob Jones University.
How about that? Wow.
Yep. And so, I was familiar with Bob Jones before I'd even actually really realized it was a school.
Mm-hmm. And just yeah.
Same thing with all of the Sunday school literature that I ever remember reading as a kid. It came from Bob Jones University.
There you go. Wow. And just to kind of, Bob Jones University is very nefarious around this time. They went as far as, so the IRS pressed them even more that you have to admit African American students. So what they did was they admitted one person who actually worked in the radio department at the time. And they admitted him, and very shortly after, he dropped out. And then I
can't imagine why. It can't possibly be because people were pressuring him to leave or anything like that, right? Couldn't possibly be the reason.
Jeez.
Well, and I think even to this day, they have rules saying that you can't date someone who is not one of your race. There's no interracial dating.
Yeah, I don't remember. Wow. I don't remember what my ex told me at the time when we talked about Bob Jones University and her stay there. But I do remember that women had to wear dresses, and
all
on
the time,
Sundays,
even when you're not in class or on campus, you have to wear a skirt all the time.
Yeah, she wasn't a skirt type girl, so that might be part of the reason why she clashed with that place so much. But also on Sundays, you had to go to church, and you had to have like a really good reason not to go to church, and that was another thing. She would always try and find reasons to not go to church, but
I
anyway.
coincidentally had a lot of migraines on Sundays. I don't know why. It
Weird.
Just happened.
Well, and just to kind of close the Bob Jones University part of the story up. So they tried to placate the IRS one last time, which essentially had them in 1975. They finally admitted Black student African Americans to the student body. However, they had to be married because they didn't want interracial dating going on at their university. So that was a strict policy that they enacted. Basically, hey, if you're Black and you're going here, you got to be married. And essentially the IRS said, all right, we're sick of this shit. It's been like 6 years. We gave you every chance possible. We are rescinding your tax exemption status. And then that's when this right-wing activist named Wayrich, that was his last name, essentially seized on that opportunity and said, oh, they're infringing on our religious freedom. They're getting in the way of it. They're not letting us have segregated guys. This is a terrible thing. And that essentially religious freedom, which we hear a lot today, was like the birth of that argument. And that essentially became the rally cry of quote unquote moral majority.
Yeah. I don't think Roe v. Wade was decided in 1973, and that whole thing started back in the 1950s. I don't think the moral majority really took off until the 80s when Reagan was in office, and he definitely really hammered on the abortion issue. So between then and Roe v. Wade, at some point there was a bit of a transformation. And I think the fact that all of a sudden abortions were an option, and of course you've got all these activists running around being like, hey, we're part of the moral majority. hey, they're killing babies. Don't you care? Stuff like that.
Yeah, and saying talking about like murdering babies is, obviously problematic, and it's easier to get people on your side that are in the middle of the political spectrum when you're saying the other guys are literally murdering babies, whereas if you're
to argue against.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's a lot easier to pull people to your side than to say, oh, well, we want to keep segregated schools. So like it changes like the dynamic of the religious right, because then that's the catalyst that can get more people on their side and on the religious rights agenda, and so that's why they transitioned away from segregation as the main moniker of what they're trying to do, and they moved towards abortion because it was just easier to polarize people on.
Right.
And it was something that they were actually able to get the northern evangelicals on board with, because desegregating wasn't really an issue in the North. No one really cared about it because, for one thing, it wasn't happening. And for another thing, they viewed that as a Southern problem. That's just a problem those racist Southern people have to deal with. Well, no, of course there's no blacks in my kid's school. There's no blacks in our neighborhood. That kind of thing. Yeah. We completely unable to see the fact that they're exactly what they're calling Southerners to be.
A while back, there was a plan. Okay, well, I'll tell you what. If there's no school, if the area is segregated, then what we'll do, we'll just bus kids around, to desegregate the schools.
Yeah, Boston.
That's why the South has
complete outrage.
Yeah, that's why the South has some of the least segregated schools, is because they actually enacted those policies.
It made me laugh so much because before this, the arguments were, well, the schools, it's just a school. What's the problem? And then when you send the white kids to the black school, they go, oh no, my kid's not getting a worse education. Well, hang on. It's a tacit admission there's a problem, but you just don't want to do anything about it.
Well, see, and one of the main things about making sure that you've got kids who, you are moving kids around like that, is that all of a sudden there's a much higher interest in making sure all the schools around you are actually decent, because your kid could end up going to any of them.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, like a lot of schools in poorer neighborhoods in, like, I don't know, Atlanta, poor black neighborhoods, they've actually got fairly decent schools just because, hey, there's a bunch of white kids going there.
Yeah, a lot of the school administrators stuff we're talking about, like just random cash injections. All of a sudden they've got like $1 million poured in, they got like new computers and new sports on, like, just because some white kids showed up.
Yep, basically. So, I mean, desegregation works, and it's very important in making sure that, all of our schools are working. And again, we're not talking about Roe v. Wade.
Exactly.
This is important, though.
It's very important, and I just realized that we're talking about desegregation as opposed to abortion.
We'll have to do a full topic on that at some point.
Oh, for sure. And it actually, and it does tie in. I mean, with the board versus education verdict, that was the moment where public schools started, the attendance in public schools started dropping, and a lot of those white students started to siphon into to private school.
Yeah,
and so. Which were more segregated post board versus education. So that's really important. But
it is tied though. It is tied to it. It's absolutely tied to the segregation, like we were saying here. Like the only reason why abortion became the catalyst as to what it was because there were these religious right people trying to clamp down on segregation, and they wanted to keep segregation. And the only reason, or the only way they could keep that going, was to defer to another topic entirely that they can actually
They had to get another rallying cry. One that people felt actually applied to them.
Yeah, something that they can polarize over.
Right.
Yeah. Which was abortion.
I believe it all came full circle, because if you look at that wing now, to me, they're openly embracing the idea of xenophobia, and you're not allowed here, essentially segregating possible, immigrants coming over. So, I mean, to me, it seems like, kind of came full circle anyway. But
Well, yeah,
but
that strain's always been around, to be honest.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, well, and it's, I mean, as I've pointed out before, if they ever actually manage to ban abortions again, it'll actually mean the evangelical vote will suddenly splinter, because right now they're united behind abortion. The vast majority of evangelicals, the only thing they look at is whether or not a candidate is pro-life. And so if they suddenly don't have to worry about that, then all of a sudden you have to try to catch something else to try to get their attention. You know, for some of them that's gun rights. For other people, it's, you know, education, like creationism in schools or whatever. You know, I mean, you can go around the list, but that means that you suddenly have to put out like at least 10 different messages, where before you only had to put out one.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So
And it's also right.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say it's also important to note too that you know, during the time that abortion was illegal in the United States from 1890 to 1973 with Roe versus Wade, abortion didn't go down. Essentially, it remained at a steady position, because people were still getting them. It was just a lot more dangerous.
It's like prohibition, you know, like when you make alcohol illegal, human beings still need those, or maybe not need, but want those things in their life. So they're going to seek them out anyway and go through an illegal channel instead. And it's the same thing with the drug war today. It's the same thing with abortions. You know, you make abortions illegal, people are going to find ways to do it, no matter what you do. And the best we can do is make it legal and actually regulate it in ways to make it safe. That's the best we can really hope for in it, you know? No matter what your stance on it is, if you're pro-life and you are anti-abortion, then that's great. Don't get an abortion. No one's forcing you to ever get one.
The remarkable thing is, one of the best ways to kill abortion is by encouraging family planning and contraception and sexual education, all of which the same people are against. So you...
Not quite.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're used to talking to the extremists online.
True.
And, you
That's
know,
what
people
Michael
like
does
Rick
all day.
Santorum who are like super Catholics or something. But I mean, like my family...
The Christian Dominionists, I mean.
Yeah, those people. They're crazy. But I think if you actually sit down and talk to people, you'll find that most of them, you know, I mean, if you talk to them about it, you know, they are pro-birth control. They are pro-family planning and stuff like that. I mean, my mother, she's extremely pro-birth control. Her exact words on the matter was, you know, God allowed us to discover birth control. Why would he do that if he didn't want us to use it? It's a bit of a silly, convoluted plan, but there you go.
However you justify it to yourself, fine.
And I know. But, so, I mean, and it's, I think, really, a lot of it is, you know, and, you know, birth control, having it readily available, whether that's, you know, the pills or condoms or whatever, because people are still going to have sex. And quite frankly, as far as I'm concerned, no one should have the right to tell you you're not allowed to have sex if both partners want to have sex, or however many people want to get involved if it's an orgy or something. But also, you know, comprehensive sex ed. It fucking works.
And that's the best way of reducing abortion rates.
Yes. Those two together will drastically decrease abortion rates. I mean, Mississippi has the highest abortion rate in the country. They have abstinence-only sex ed.
Yeah.
The other one
or at
would
least
be
they used
opening
to.
up. Because I know there's some weird laws about the way doctors are supposed to treat abortion in terms
Or I
of
should say,
life-giving.
not abortion rate. I'm sorry. Mississippi has the highest teen pregnancy rate, I should say. I'm not sure about abortion rate. Texas has the highest, what is it called? Repeat teen pregnancy rate, which means people who have already been pregnant getting pregnant again before they're even actually adults. So by the time you're 18, you've had 2 kids.
Problematic.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a little bit.
Right.
I'm not sure all of Texas is abstinence-only education, but I know a large portion of Texas is. It's kind of hard to tell because they're a huge state and they've got a lot of school districts. So I'm not sure if that's a statewide mandate or if it's more a local thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to me, it sounds like those girls who were getting pregnant and having babies at a young age are unequipped and just to be a mother. They're just not ready, and it kind of ties into what I have here, which is on PlannedParenthood.com, they have a flurry of information. And so there's a section that talks about like the different reasons people decide to end a pregnancy. And it says some of those include they want to be the best parent possible to the kids they already have, implying that, and I would like to also piggybacking on that, a lot of people who get an abortion already have children. But also continuing, they're not ready to be a parent yet. It's not a good time in their life to have a baby. They want to finish school, focus on work, or achieve other goals before having a baby. They're not in a relationship with someone they want to have a baby with. They're in an abusive relationship or were sexually assaulted. The pregnancy is bad for their health, and or they just don't want to be a parent. And
yeah.
So yeah.
And I would add, kids are extremely expensive. The more children you have, the poorer you will be. Just in general, it doesn't matter how much money you make. The less money you will have, the more kids you have, the less money you will have. If you make $100,000 a year, you could probably afford to have 4 or 5 kids. But if you make like $20,000 a year, I'm not sure you can afford even 1 kid. I know people make it work. I have no idea how.
I would say
I've made $20,000 a year.
Probably a lot of those people have government assistance of some sort, which is actually a good thing. And then this is another thing that the right wing is also trying to destroy too, is that.
Well, charity. Charity will take care of it because, charity worked so well prior to all these social programs. Oh, wait, that's why we instituted the social programs, because charity didn't take care of it.
Weird.
Goodness.
But, yeah.
So, yeah, also, I also want to get into some stats here because some of them were like kind of amazing. I didn't know how common abortion really was. And it says, this is according to Planned Parenthood, they say that overall 1 in 4 women in the U.S. will have an abortion by the time they're 45 years old. That's massive, and just restricting that access to that many people. That's huge. That can have some really, really horrible consequences. And also kind of going down a list of a couple more stats I have here. And it's according to Harvard Health Publishing. They say that, quote, roughly 1/2 of all abortions are done during the first 8 weeks of pregnancy and about 88% during the first 12 weeks of pregnancy. So that's within the first trimester. And that's important because like how we said how Texas has a ban on abortion after 20 weeks. And the reason for why they do things like that is because they feel as though the fetus is in pain. And so I'm going to adjust that a little bit with another stat I have here. And it says, according to the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, quote, pain is not possible until after 24 weeks, which, kind of goes against that timeline that time that these right-wing or Republican states have in place in terms of when they stop abortion. And also one final stat I would like to bring up is it says, according to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, 99% of abortions in the U.S. happen before 24 weeks. Before that time in particular. So, or excuse me. Yes, before the quote unquote, before the fetus begins to develop the pain.
Their nervous system.
The feeling of pain, exactly.
Yeah, so, without a nervous system, you can't feel pain. That's how we feel pain is through the nervous system. So, there's that. Which is why some of these heartbeat bills are so ridiculous, because, you know, the heart doesn't feel pain. Your brain feels pain.
It's just a muscle.
Yeah. Shoot. Oh, right. I also wanted to talk a little bit about, there's a lot of controversy regarding the idea of whether or not to give an abortion or get an abortion when you find out the child has some kind of defect. I think most of us, at least here, agree that, a fatal defect, which means that you would essentially be giving birth to a dead child, is something that, we're like, yeah, why bother carrying around a dead child for, another however many weeks? Just go ahead and get the body out, get the baby out, and that way you can mourn and move on with your life. But there's a lot of debate regarding whether or not, like, how moral and ethical it is to get an abortion when you find out that the child has other defects that will essentially incur a lot of medical costs, cause a lot of pain to the child throughout their life, or even just other things like that. And this includes things like there's people who say you shouldn't do screenings for Down syndrome because they're afraid that people will get abortions when they find out that the child has Down syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I guess I look at it from the perspective of someone who doesn't have a whole lot of money, because I look at it going, if I were in a position where I felt that I could support a child financially, so I wanted to have a child, and then I found out that child is going to incur a ton of medical costs throughout their entire life, and then I will have to basically incur those costs, and then I look at it going, I can't do that. I don't have the money. I don't have the funds. There's no way I can afford a child who has, major birth defects or anything like that will require medical coverage, a lot of medical costs. Which, mind you, yes, I know this is not something that really applies in the UK.
It still does. There are still costs associated, travel costs, and you have to take time off work, and you have to care for the kid and things like that.
And there's all that. You'd have to essentially, all that. So I understand why someone would want to get an abortion then, because a lot of times people are like, oh, well, just put it up for adoption then. Put a child with disabilities up for adoption. How many people do you think there are looking for a child with disabilities that they want to adopt?
Mm-hmm.
So they just end up basically in the system, in social services, for pretty much until they turn 18, or if it's a severe disability and they're never considered mentally capable, then they literally end up under government care for the rest of their lives.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which isn't great. It's not a good quality.
Yeah,
spending your tax dollars for an entire life.
My point isn't about the tax dollars. My point is about
it's the morality, isn't it?
Yeah, because I know how deficient our foster care system is. And that's for children who don't have any disabilities. For children who have disabilities, it's much worse.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I mean, if we had some kind of universal health care where, it was actually affordable, where, it wouldn't be this massive financial burden to have a child who has disabilities, then it would be a different story, I think, for most people.
Right.
Because then it would be this moment of, oh shit, what the fuck am I going to do? I can't afford this child. Right.
And that concern can sometimes be so strong that it overrides someone's religious beliefs. So, actually, I have a stat from the Guttmacher Institute, and it says that 17% of abortion patients in 2014 identified as mainland Protestant, 13% as evangelical Protestant, and 24% as Catholic. And the other 38% reported no religious affiliation, and the remaining 8% reported some other affiliation. So, I mean, it's pretty diverse, a diverse group of people who are getting abortions, not just, these sinful secular people may think.
Yeah, well, we all know, Catholics, there's your actual like hardcore, I believe everything the Pope says, every tenet, and then there's people who are like, yeah, I went to mass and confession. I'm not due for another confession for a while. Bye, I'm off to the bar. So there's different Catholics. But, I'm not saying that there aren't Catholics who don't, who aren't like very religious, because they definitely are. There's definitely I'd say a fairly large number of them even, but then there's plenty of people that, they just show up to confession, mass, and then they just fuck off to do their own thing. And by the way, there's a lot of Protestants like that too. They show up to church, then they fuck off to go do whatever the fuck they want. Half of them don't even bother showing up to church because all you got to do is pray your little prayer and you're fine.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
I say that as a former Protestant.
Yeah, you sound very familiar.
Yeah. Oh.
But I mean, what do you say? Before we wrap up, I do kind of want to get a little clinical for a second, because a lot of people don't actually understand. I think it's important for us to talk about the process of an abortion. I think it's very mystical to many people, especially if you're a man, and I've heard, of people who believe that it's, they're opening you up, it's a full-on procedure where, they put you under the knife, but it's anything but that, actually. So there's actually two options that are normally available for people seeking abortion. And the first one is called a medication abortion, and is actually a pill that you take at the health center, and another pill taken about 1 or 2 days after, when you're at home. And that essentially ends the pregnancy, which is everything, the fetus, oh God, I'm blinking. The placenta.
This is the one where you pee it out, like Tensai was saying before.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's basically, it causes, well, I mean, for most women, it's going to be very similar to basically your menstruation cycle.
Yeah, your period, yeah.
You get your period.
Yep, you're shutting it off. And it just causes the uterus to expel the pregnancy. And I think that's, people are familiar with the idea of a pill. They know that one. But the one that's, I think, at least familiar is the clinic abortion. And that's when a doctor and a nurse or other.
Hold on, wait. They take a giant knife and then like tweezers and then rip it apart violently, right? Because that's what the religious right likes to try and fearmonger about.
I think that's a horror movie you were thinking of.
Yeah. Or one of those, what were they called? Like hell houses that the religious right always puts out there?
There's like 15 million of them out there. Just take your pick.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. Or like Project Veritas, who said that Planned Parenthood was selling baby parts. But I'm not going to dwell on those fuckers.
Move on.
That never happened. So the least familiar is the clinic abortion, which has a doctor, nurse, or other healthcare provider using medical instruments and gentle suction to remove the pregnancy from the uterus. And the procedure actually takes around 10 minutes. However, before any of this is ever done, an individual they meet with like staff to discuss, what abortion is the right one for them. And, they also undergo an exam and lab tests and read and sign forms. So it's and that altogether can take up, a couple hours. So yeah, just thought that's very important for people to understand, and also that there is minimal risk to an abortion. This is the last thing I do want to, and it's that according to Planned Parenthood, they said, quote, abortion is safe unless there's a rare and serious complication that's not treated. There's no risk to your ability to have children in the future or to your overall health. Having an abortion doesn't increase your risk for breast cancer or affect your fertility. In fact, it's possible to get pregnant quickly after you have an abortion. So it's a good idea to talk to your nurse or doctor about a birth control plan for after your abortion. So yeah.
Yeah. I think if it's a third trimester abortion, it might be slightly different, just because it'll be harder to get the head out and everything.
Yeah.
And well, I mean, obviously, I think third trimester abortions are pretty much banned in the United States anyway.
Unless,
and they're not
I think
very common
Over
to begin
here,
with.
it's the limit's 24 weeks, and then after that, it's special circumstance.
Yeah.
Yeah. And oh, sorry.
Most induced abortions at that point are actually a case of the child is already dead and you're just removing its body.
Mhm.
Or it might jeopardize the mother's health or something,
Yes.
right? Usually.
Yeah, there are some women who it will literally kill them, and that has more to do with the process of pregnancy itself, which is an extremely risky process. Some women it barely affects them, but there are other women who it literally can kill them. So I mean, just because someone who managed to pop out 5 kids without even hardly wincing, doesn't mean that the woman who's like literally been bedridden since she was 2 months pregnant isn't that doesn't mean that she's faking it. No, it just affects her differently.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
So.
Yeah. And with that, unfortunately, kind of have to close things, but I'm happy we kind of went into this and kind of shed a lot of light. I learned so much about not only the process, but just the history of it all.
Yeah. And I found it really, really important to realize, though, that the pro-life people out there, you've kind of been duped by the religious right in so where things are. Like it's not that abortion was like some like radical thing. Like we've been having abortions since the beginning of human civilization and everything. They've been happening forever, and they'll always continue to happen. But you guys have been sort of like wrapped into a segregationist plot, in the
I wouldn't put it that way.
I don't know. Maybe it's a little bit too strong, but
I think that's
I don't know.
That's more into conspiracy theory territory, and I don't think that's quite applicable. I think it's just they shifted their focus, and then over time, their original message was pretty much lost.
Yeah, but like originally, it was the segregationists were trying to find something to catalyze people over, and to do that, they found something, and that was abortion.
Yeah, because if abortion goes away tomorrow, like there's literally like all abortions are banned throughout the entire United States. It's not like all of a sudden they'll be like, and now let's desegregate schools. No, you'll have like maybe like 5 guys that say that, or 5 people that'll say that, and everyone else go, what the fuck?
I mean, they have been trying to push for that for a long time too. It's just that's a little bit more of like a nuanced issue.
It's a different movement, is my point.
Yeah,
it's different. Just like, the gun nuts. They're different from the abortion group. Yes, there's overlap. There's always overlap.
But that's the Republican Party, though.
That that's the entire thing.
No, of course not. But that's what I'm trying to say here, though, is that they're being used to further the segregationist agenda, and that is in the Republican Party still. Well, the Republicans still are trying to do things in that effect, That's why they're doing this school choice stuff and everything now, too.
I see it more as the segregationists are trying to use abortion, and at the same time, they're not really making any progress with it. Because people hear abortion, and then they just stop paying attention to the rest of their message. And it's not... The school choice thing is actually completely different. That's a different argument, and it's one that people talk about and have many, many different ideas about, even amongst the pro-life people.
That properly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
We'll talk about it eventually in the future again, but yeah.
All right.
We have a little bit of different...
I can go on forever, I know.
I was just going to change it, but I think I'm going to stick with my original one, and I want to talk about public transport. Because it's incredibly important to modern society, and no one really seems to care about it. So, that's the next topic.
It's not very sexy. And I think that's why it doesn't get,
Oh, are you kidding? Trains are super sexy. We saw this amazing train at the National Train Museum. It was amazing.
I hate when people call things sexy, personally. Like, public transport's not sexy. It's not sexy. Like, who cares? That's not a word to use in this context, in my opinion.
The Silver Surfer is fucking sexy.
I find people using sexy on those situations to be kind of cringy.
You were just not attracted to the right thing if you do not find trains sexy. That's all.
Hey, I'm not saying I don't.
That's just weird.
I was talking to Chris.
You just calm down over
Buses
there.
that do it for me.
Well, this might also be because Aubrey lives in Iowa, and what else is there to look at other than like cows and farmland? And so, like the occasional train seems like really interesting now, right?
It must seem like sci-fi to those people.
No, I'm joking.
Wow.
I'm joking. Okay, just calm down.
I've probably seen more trains than you have.
Yeah, probably.
Considering I've got.
But there's more
main
interesting
line
things here than trains. That's all I'm trying to say.
Chicago and California running right by my house.
So anyway, yeah, that's the topic for next week.
Sorry, Mike.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
All right, so with that, are there anything in closing you guys would like?
Nope.
Nope. All right,
guys.
Fuck himself.
I just want to say trains are fucking awesome, and Chris doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. Also, fuck Steve King.
That's exactly what I would expect a Iowa person to say. That's just all I'm saying. So I'm good.
Fuck you too.
Anyway, have a good night, guys. Have a good one. We'll see you next week.
All right, take care.